Welcome to another episode of Start the Week with Wisdom. I'm your host, Bridget Burns from the University Innovation Alliance.
And I'm Sara Custer from Inside Higher Ed.
Each week we team up to have a conversation with a leader in the field to learn a bit about their perspective and gather some of their wisdom, hopefully to share with you on a Monday in an uplifting way. That's why we call it Start the Week with Wisdom.
The show Weekly Wisdom is sponsored by Mainstay, the student engagement and retention platform proven to work through peer-reviewed research, like when it helped Georgia State reduce summer melt by 21%, or in another study when Mainstay helped GSU retain 1,200 students. Check out the research and learn more at mainstay.com.
And the Innovating Together podcast, which this is later broadcast on, is sponsored by the Carnegie Corporation of New York, which is a generous sponsor of the UIA. So we're grateful for that. And today we're super excited to bring out, I feel like I need a drum roll. I'm running through like we should hold up the piece of paper and you break through it. It's like the perfect
football game. Yeah.
Welcome, Chancellor Wilcox from UC Riverside. We're excited to have you here.
Great to be here. And I haven't run through a banner since high school football. So
you really got to get on it. I mean, if there's any perk of being a chancellor for 11 years, it's that you should be able to snap your fingers and get to run through something.
I should have a banner. You're right.
Well, that's it's on the list. So you and I first met 11 years ago when you were just becoming, you were just started as Chancellor for UC Riverside, but you have a distinguished career working around the country at a variety of institutions, some of which were UIA campuses. But now you've been here for a while, and we want to learn about your leadership style and how you think it's might maybe have evolved during your time here. I don't know. So I'll start it off with our first question, which is so you as a leader, we're curious about what most informed your style as a leader. Like, was it a person or an experience? But just talk to us about that.
Yeah, I don't know if there was an experience. There certainly were some people. I think of Dave Schulenberger, who was the provost at the University of Kansas when I was a department chair and a dean many years ago. He had a really thoughtful and effective style. I had a mentor also at Kansas, Dick Schiefelbusch, who was a national figure in disabilities research, and some of the guidance that he gave me. So there were people that I had a chance to watch and learn from. There was no big aha moment of, oh my goodness, I should do things differently. But I've always been watching people, I guess I would say.
Are those kind of the people that maybe you've got your brain or mind just kind of goes back to fairly regularly?
Yeah, I don't know if I don't have a bracelet that says WWDD, what would David do? But yeah, I do sometimes think about being in similar situations on the other side of the table or at the table and different roles and how that played out and how it felt, good or bad. I think that's an important part of success in these jobs, is always thinking about the rest. As a dean, I've repeatedly told the associate deans when we were talking about something, think about the department chairs and what this is going to mean to them.
Mm-hmm.
Are they going to be able to answer these questions? Is the report more bother than it's worth? Is this something rational that they can explain to the faculty in the department? If not, all of our machinations really don't matter, because it just is going to make things worse, not better. So put yourself on the receiving side and think about what that means, not just in the concept, but in the day-to-day.
Yeah. That empathetic leadership, I think, is really powerful. On kind of the flip side of that, are there any leadership lessons you've learned from observing bad leadership examples?
I've never seen a bad example.
Those don't exist.
Yes, of course. Probably the most important piece that I think has shaped me more than anything else is watching some micromanagers. And again, feeling how that felt. That you end up putting everyone in a no-win situation. If you do something, the micromanager is going to change it, or if you don't, they're going to do it themselves. And it doesn't help. So I used to talk about people staying in their lanes. That's a little too restrictive. I now try to talk about letting people do their job. And I mean, that implies respecting their space, but it also implies respecting their ability, respecting their knowledge, respecting their wisdom. We worked hard in most cases to run a search to find the very best person with the best insights and the best of everything. And it's a shame not to let them explore that experience set in a new situation and do all that we want them to do. And it's also liberating for me because I don't have to do it. So yeah, I think the micromanaging piece is what I would go to first, is my go-to bad example.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think
I should say it's very tempting for all of us, because most upper level administrators got in the job because they're pretty good at doing stuff. You don't promote somebody who doesn't get things done. And so they're doers. We're all doers by nature.
Mm-hmm.
And we're, good little doobies, for those of you old enough to know that analogy. And so it's hard to break yourself of that habit of just wanting to do it yourself.
Mm-hmm.
I think every one of us, we can think of someone who's like a superstar individual that makes a very rocky transition to managing other people. That is like if there is a theme to higher ed, it is that we struggle with that and figuring out how to give folks the skills to do some of the stuff that feels less super scientific, but it's the people management, it's the change management, it's the navigating bureaucracy stuff that that really is a bumpy spot for.
There are thousands of some of the smartest people in the world right outside this building. It would be a shame for me to get in the way of all that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So my question is, you've been at this role for 11 years. You had
bringing that up. Does that seem like a long time to you?
Hey, this month is my 10 years. So I get you. My question though is, because I feel like I've reached the point in where I'm, there's enough familiar problems, right? Where I can actually feel like, oh, okay, yeah, I've done this before. And so when I'm coaching my team, I can give that example. But I still keep running into new stuff. And I'm just wondering, for you, are you still running into new leadership problems that stump you? Or do you feel like you've gotten to the place where you have enough of a kind of a repertoire of experiences and lessons that you can kind of, grab onto? Or like, what's the percentage of new?
That's a great question. It sounds a little hubris to say I don't see anything new anymore, but to a large extent, that's true. And I guess it's also at the level of analysis. Everything is new, and that the world is new, and issues nationally are new, and so forth. But the concepts, the precepts of kind of how do we do with them, how do we do something, what do we do with them, are pretty stable, I guess. So whether it's faculty members in sexual harassment situations or other kinds of challenging situations, or students with protests and concerns. We've all been spending a lot of time talking about how these recent protests, Gaza, Israel, are the same as or different from those in the 60s with Vietnam. There are differences, but the nature of how do you engage, back in the 60s, it was, you need to engage with the students, you need to listen to their concerns. There's only so many things we can do. You need to listen to the legislature. Yeah, I mean, the things in that regard are the same. And having been through them a few times, you do learn. The best example is budget cuts. I've been through 5 maybe rounds of national budget cuts, because they're as you know, every 7 years we get one. And there are some basic principles that apply. Always cut early and hard. You can always go back and patch, but if you put it off, you're going to walk off the cliff. Lots of conversations, no special committees. The last thing you need in a budget cut is a special committee. If the committees you have in place aren't informed and effective, creating a new one, whole cloth of people who've never been in the conversation before and charging them with the most important things in the university doesn't seem very prudent to me. That's the time to rely on your systems. You may have to advise, you may have to lead. So I mean, there are some things that just make sense, whether it's a 5%, 50%, or 10% budget cut, for instance. So yeah, I would say after a while, you do have a sense of all of these and some principles that you can rely on or some experiences.
Chancellor Wilcox, what would you say is
sorry, you can call me Kim, please.
Okay. Kim, what would you say is the hardest experience or chapter in your tenure as a leader, or perhaps your least favorite recurring problem?
Okay. Let me take the second question. I can always go back to the first. My least favorite recurring problem is something I call puppetry. That's where students and or staff and or faculty take advantage of leading students into discussions on their behalf. They prop them up to do things, fight for this, advocate for that. And I don't mean take anything away from my students, our students who are serious in their commitments, but too often they're being taken advantage of by faculty and staff leaders. That is one thing that just frustrates me deeply. Instead of having those leaders work with the students, help them understand what their concerns might be, what their needs are, how they might be addressed, and let them then move that forward. They oftentimes come with, and sometimes they're just transparent. We demand another half-time staff member in this office. Well, where did they come up with that? They weren't sitting around the residence hall at night thinking, you know what this university needs? And that's just a lot of that. So that's one on my list. I used to talk, and my wife was in student affairs for many years. I used to talk about the need for the campus to be more integrated, particularly across the academic student affairs chasm. That still exists. Again, back to Bridget's question about how things have changed. There's some basic things that haven't changed, and I think we'd all be better off if we had a different connection with or understanding of the other parts of the university. And again, back to Bridget's comment on moving into leadership positions, there's just a lot about a university that most faculty members have no clue. How do you package financial aid? What are the dynamics in lobbying the legislature? I mean, and why would you know that? But the extent to which some of that were better understood, the internal pieces in particular, I think we'd be better off.
So I'll follow up on that because I have my own answer, but I'm curious if there was one class.
Bridges, so we play your role. You're asking, I'm answering.
No, I know. You had one class that
I'll let you know when it's your turn.
No, I don't want to tell you what my thoughts are, but if you could assign one class or one piece, one body of knowledge that everyone who worked in higher ed needed to understand, and it would make your job as a leader easier. Is there a topic for you that really, man, we just don't do a good enough job educating folks about this thing that feels like it's outside their lane, but it would make it so we could be better colleagues to each other if they understood it?
Okay, I'm going to tie these together. So Dick Schiffelbush, I referred to earlier, my senior colleague at Kansas, one time told me, Kim, when somebody says there's no money for that, they're lying to you. There's always money for that. What they're telling you is they think something else is more important. And underlying that simple truism is the fact that we only have so much money. Everybody on campus has great needs, great aspirations. There's 1,000 things I wish I could support, but I can't. And so to say a budget class is a little trite, but to have, and it's not, I guess, basic economics, but some sense of here's the set. We have X dollars and we're funding A through Y things. If you want something else, we got to decide what goes out. And that basic notion would be good for everybody, because again, everybody has a request. I for decades, I was one of those people making requests. But the rest of it is the challenge. And that's students, faculty, and staff.
That's
and
right.
administrators.
Mm-hmm.
Deans who want, well, we got to cut something else. Well, of course, the dean, it's easy. It's somebody else's college.
I often find it's helpful for people to just get a little bit of a peek behind the curtain to realize that there are no easy decisions being made by leaders. Like, no, there's no committee on which frosting flavor to choose. It is, a bad decision versus a bad decision. It is a hard decision, like the pain is going to be felt differently. And I do think that we don't do a good enough job helping people understand that there's like nobody twisting their mustache somewhere. It's like,
and I don't know if you can see, but in fact, there is no bag of money under my desk.
Darn it. We were really hoping. That's the whole reason we had this schedule specifically near the money bag.
What's been the most surprising thing about your career, Kim?
Oh, that's a great question. There's a lot of small things. I guess the biggest one is I never thought I would become an administrator. I never wanted to be one. I got out of graduate school and I aspired to teach my classes, run a nice little lab where I could have a lot of students working with me, undergraduates in particular, graduate students. And I did that for several years. I'll try not to make the story too long, but it turns out I'd newly been tenured and promoted at Kansas when our department chair left. And the group, the faculty decided we were going to lobby the dean for a new chair. And in the interim, we needed an interim. And no one could agree on anyone but me. I didn't want to do it, didn't think I'd be good at it. I spent a year as interim. The dean said, no, you can't recruit another dean, or another chair rather. And by then I found I enjoyed it more than I ever thought I would, and I was better at it than I thought I would be. And so that's probably the biggest surprise if I go all the way back to the beginning. There were lots of other crazy things like every good career. I'm one of the few people in America who went from department chair to president to dean. We can talk about that some other time. But the biggest surprise really was that I'm doing it at all.
And what I'm curious to know, because that is often a kind of dark side, light side, crossing the Rubicon tension between faculty and administrators in higher education. So what surprised you about liking that more than you thought you would?
I remember at the time thinking when I was a faculty member, I could really do a lot of things to help the students in my lab, whether it was personal advising and counseling or finding support, applications for grants and the rest. As department chair, I could do it for all the students in the department and all the faculty and staff in the department. It was just a bigger positive impact than I could have in my little lab. And it wasn't too long after being department chair, I'm thinking, just think if you were dean. That would be even better. I mean, so it was that sense of instrumentality on behalf of others that was really very appealing.
I am curious about your, so we asked you the hard question about the hardest thing. Sorry about that. That's always tough, but it's always the most informative. But I'm curious about, not that, I expect that you will be chancellor for 20 years. And so you're just barely at the halfway point. But if you have to look back now, because you have a lot of things to be, I know that graduation day is really special. I know that there are really important moments that have happened. But if you had to pick one thing that you think you're proudest of as a leader today, looking back, is there one story or thing that for you is like the thing you go home and talk about that's the thing?
Can I give you two? I'll give you first half of the career, second half of the career. First half of the career was I took over the leadership of the system in Kansas at a very tumultuous time. The legislature was threatening to disband the Board of Regents until they realized they couldn't by the Constitution. There was lots of turmoil. While I was there, we reset things to the point that the entire state was pleased with what we did. We had consultants in who said they'd never seen such a positive reaction in a state, whether it was the Rotary Club in Dodge City or the governor. People were really supportive of the plan we put together and we were doing it. So that's always been a point of pride. But I think the bigger point is the one that Bridget gets a lot of credit for. In the last decade, working with Bridget and others in the UIA primarily, we've changed how America thinks about higher education. When I took this job, almost no one was talking about graduation rates, student success, social mobility. It just wasn't part of the, I went to conferences all the time and people would talk about, they put up the graphs about all their, it wasn't part of the conversation. And now it is, it's being thrown back in our face at times. Why didn't you do this? Why didn't you do that? But that's a huge transformation. And I give UCR a lot of credit because we were one of those, we're one of the few that managed to do it while being world-class in academics and research. So we were one of the places, along with several of the colleagues in the UIA, that when people said you couldn't do it, we said, no, 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 you can't do it. We're doing it. You can be world-class, and you can be as connected to your students and as effective for them as anyone can. That's a transition that happened in the early part of the 21st century that I think will change how America thinks about higher education.
Knock on wood.
It sounds like that collaboration element was certainly key to a lot of that success. Would you like to see more collaboration? Do you
No,
expect
I'm opposed to it.
I'm against it.
That was too soft.
editors
That was too soft to pitch, Sarah.
hating each other?
Yeah,
softballs, Kim.
Collaboration is always good. I mean, that's like mom and apple pie. I think what the UIA has done, and others, but certainly we've worked hard to try to be smarter about collaboration. So it isn't just people getting together talking. I've been going to conferences for 40 years, I'll say. And we know how those go. The person stands up, talks about a great thing they did and how good it is, and then they sit down, and the next person stands up. And we all get together. Being smarter about how we collaborate, thinking together about what our goals are. And in the UIA, we have some common goals. We also have some goals that some universities tie into and others don't. Thinking about how we can each be part of the collaboration. This isn't we are like universities. We're all large public universities, but we're also quite different. We range in size from 25,000, I think, or some of that, to 100,000. We range in our control systems and our oversight system. But we have lots of differences, and to think about how those what those mean in different kinds of collaborations in different questions, we can be a lot more sophisticated. And it turns out we're all, part of the UIA is continuing testing what the right mix of those schools is and how do they fit together. You can't do it in a national association, ACE, APLU. You can't do it. The scale's too big. And 3 or 4 schools in a state system can't do it. The scale's too small and too homogeneous. What's the right mix of that, particularly as it relates to students and their experience? That's difficult. We know how to do it in research. You take these 4 or 5 schools that are all great in geoscience, and there's a call from the NSF. We know how to do it. We really are neophytes in trying to do this in the student success space.
Mm-hmm.
It's true. Well, thanks for that. I wanted to know what has been the best the advice that you have received that has served you the most in your career that you find yourself going back to as a touchstone? You shared a little bit, but is there other stuff? Because the folks at home, we often hear feedback about the advice that is shared in this moment in the call or in the show is always a really informative for them. So is there stuff that's for you been like, wow, that's been profound? Well,
let me start with, for those listening, that I get feedback all the time from campus about that's his advice. So don't. I'm joking. This sounds like a joke, but it's not at all. Some of the best advice I ever got was from my wife many years ago. She was also a university administrator at the time. And we had been over a couple of years, been putting off vacations. Couldn't go now. We got this due, couldn't go that. She finally said, Kim, if you don't take a vacation, no one else thinks they should take a vacation. Mm-hmm. That was profound for me because I falsely was thinking, I need to stay here and get the stuff done. It'd be good for everyone. No, I need to leave. That would be what would, and leave, not just be on the phone every minute, even though I'm gone, be gone. And then they feel empowered to do the same thing. So that's probably my best advice. The other advice was don't compare yourself to others. You're never going to feel good because somebody else is always better off. For me, I'm in a great university, but in the same system as Berkeley. What are you going to do? Yeah, I can't live long enough to outplay Berkeley. Comparing myself high or low on the ladder doesn't matter. Do the best you can, and whether that's a university or deans looking at other deans or whatever it might be, just play your hand as best you can, and things will be fine.
That's great.
And what advice would you give to others who aspire to higher education leadership?
I would say for me, it has been terribly rewarding. And yeah, I've been at it long enough that, people know me, but even when nobody knew me, it was terribly rewarding because, again, you could do things on behalf of your colleagues, your institution, and I loved my research and, getting something printed and having people recognize you at a conference. Oh, I loved your paper. Okay, here's a story. So I had somebody one time tell me she loved my paper at a conference. And there were two people in my field at the time, both last names Wilcox. And she went on for a while, and I said, I don't think I wrote that paper. Oh, no. This went on back for a while. I finally said, well, thank you. And so there's rewarding things across universities. But this is also reward. It isn't just work to do. It's a very different lifestyle. The biggest difference is the release of control. I carry in my pocket my schedule that someone else makes, and then I proceed. That's totally unknown to a faculty member, where you control everything. So there are some sacrifices, but I think the rewards are large.
But also, can I just follow up? So you actually every day print out, or does someone have that? So I think that's really interesting.
Someone else does that.
I actually wish I had that, because my phone, if I look at my phone, you're going to lose me. I'm going to find some notification or otherwise, but like having a printed copy of your schedule feels actually kind of innovative.
It's just a page out of Outlook. And what it does is, now if you're in a meeting and you think it's running long, you can't get your phone out to see what your next meeting is. But you can, when people aren't looking, kind of do one of these. Now it's in your lap. And now you can see what's next. And you can, and also before I go into a meeting, I try to look at it. But sometimes I forget, but you can look at it before you go into a meeting, and you know exactly what time the next one is and who it is and what it is. Yeah, it's just very helpful.
Man, there you go. Talk about innovation.
And I know I'm sounding like an old guy, but you can also fold it the other way and write on the back if you have to.
Hey.
This is exactly what we're looking for here, the practical tips to navigate meetings that won't end, which is really what leaders need. So, well, you've shared about advice that you've given and that has been given to you. But the last thing is there a book that has been a touchstone that you often recommend to other people that has been helpful in terms of informing your thinking about leadership or about your job, or even just for you that right now you're kind of loving?
Well, that's two different questions in part. I've never been much for leadership books. I've scanned a few and just found them, give me a break. But I read a lot of biographies, and I find them very helpful and very interesting, whether it's Catherine the Great or Abraham Lincoln, or reading Hubert Humphrey right now. People who have been through a set of circumstances and what they did and what that meant and whatever other people did. I enjoy biographies, but I think I've learned a lot from them. I'm a nonfiction guy usually.
It's interesting that you say that, because I've only been doing this a few times, but other people have also said biographies, autobiographies, biographies. Is that a common response, Bridget, to that question?
It's kind of split down the middle. About 50% have like a very specific book, and that is the book that is like a touchstone, and they will recommend it. And there's a huge range out there in terms of the type of stuff. There's a small section that will recommend, like, Freeman Hrabowski would recommend like a French literature book that was written in French because he was learning how to speak French. Yes. But then a large number who are like, Theodore Roosevelt or some leader. Yeah. So it is, it's like leadership case studies, basically.
Yeah. Interesting.
I would make one recommendation to people out there in a university: Lab Girl. It is a great book written by a faculty member in the plant sciences, and there's a whole analogy to trees, because that's her work area. But it's a great book. Most anyone who's run a lab in a university will resonate with it. Lab Girl.
Lab A Girl.
Lab Girl, 2 words.
Oh, Lab Girl.
Yep.
All right. Well, that's we've never had that recommendation before, so this is great. That's perfect. Some people add those to their list, and this is their library.
Now that I've said it out loud, let me make sure I'm jumping on Zoom, jumping on Firefox real quick to make sure that is the name of the game book.
Well, we
Yep. Lab Girl: a memoir.
okay.
Lab Girl memoir.
Perfect. Well, Chancellor Wilcox, thanks so much for spending time with us. I feel like we got a richer understanding of you as a leader. You did get to laugh a few times, which I feel like that's the one thing that people always would take away, is that you have the most distinctive laugh in all of higher education.
You almost had acerbic.
Like it's the most famous laugh there is. And people, like, I could just play a clip and I want to record it for my ringtone. It's just, puts you in a good mood already. So but thank you so much for spending this time with us. And Sara, as always, it's lovely to spend this time and learn about leadership with you.
Been a pleasure. Thank you.
Same. I enjoyed it a bunch.